In a land shaped by glaciers and hardened through centuries of cold, where the sun barely graced the sky before retreating into long, dark winters, the people of medieval Scandinavia lived in close harmony with the land, not through conquest, but through endurance and adaptation. Their survival depended on what the earth could reluctantly offer, and the most vital gift it gave them was a humble grain rye. This grain was more than just a crop, it was the backbone of medieval Scandinavian life. It was the lifeline that sustained families through harsh winters and poor harvests, the steady pulse that kept communities alive amid adversity. But why rye? What made this coarse, resilient grain so indispensable to a region so defined by its challenging climate and geography? To understand this, we must travel back in time and place ourselves amid the rugged landscapes and the relentless cycles of nature that shaped life in the north. Medieval Scandinavia was a place of extremes. Majestic fjords cut through the land, towering pine forests stretched across vast stretches, and countless lakes reflected the often gray sky. Yet beneath this beauty was a harsh reality. The soil was often rocky, acidic, and thin. Winters were long and unforgiving, with snow covering the ground for months, frost arriving early and leaving late, and summers short and cool. The growing season was limited, making agriculture a constant gamble. While grains like wheat and barley thrived in warmer, more fertile regions of Europe, here in the north they struggled. Wheat, delicate and demanding, often failed. Barley, though somewhat hardier, was vulnerable to the unpredictable frost and poor soils. Rye, however, was different. It was tough, resilient, and able to grow where others could not. Rye's adaptability made it invaluable. It could root deeply into poor acidic soils, withstand cold snaps, and even survive waterlogged fields. Where other grains withered, rye pushed forward. It was the first grain to be sown in late summer, establishing itself before the cold set in, and the last to be harvested, often stretching into the next growing season. This resilience meant that even when conditions were bleak, rye could often provide enough food to sustain a family. For the people of medieval Scandinavia, rye was much more than a staple crop. It was a symbol of hope and security. Food scarcity was a constant threat, and the success or failure of a rye harvest could mean the difference between famine and survival. Families depended on rye's ability to endure, storing the grain carefully through winter months when fresh food was scarce. Rye became a kind of insurance policy, a guarantee that, no matter what the season brought, there would be something to eat. Communities across Norway, Sweden, and Denmark organized their agricultural calendar around rye. Planting occurred just as the summer warmth faded, with harvesting taking place nearly a year later. This long cycle demanded patience and deep knowledge of the land. Villagers worked together to ensure the grain thrived, and in return, rye helped bind them together in mutual dependence and shared survival. Rye was also transformed into one of the most enduring and practical foods of the region, bread. But this was no delicate, airy loaf common in southern Europe. Medieval Scandinavian rye bread was dense, dark, and hearty, designed to last through the winter without spoiling. Its thick crust and heavy crumb made it a reliable source of sustenance that could be stored for weeks or even months. In the deepest cold of winter, when travel was impossible and fresh food was scarce, rye bread was a daily necessity. It filled bellies slowly, providing steady energy against biting winds and long nights. It was eaten by peasants working the fields, fishermen braving icy seas, and monks living in secluded stone monasteries. This bread was a unifying force, a daily reminder of the grain's vital role in the region's survival. The importance of rye extended beyond food. It was a key economic resource in medieval Scandinavia. Because rye could be stored without refrigeration, it became a form of currency in itself. Surplus grain was traded for essential goods like tools, salt, wool, and fish. Granaries filled with rye were a sign of stability and prosperity, and during times of war, armies depended on rye stores to sustain their troops. The grain also played a role in the larger medieval economy through trade. The Hanseatic League, a powerful network of merchants and trading cities around the Baltic Sea, regularly dealt in rye from Scandinavian ports. Ships laden with sacks of rye crossed the cold waters, exchanging the fruits of northern labor for luxury goods and essentials from southern and eastern Europe. Rye's reliability made it a sought-after commodity in a world where food security was never guaranteed. Beyond its practical uses, rye held spiritual significance. In many rural churches, rye bread was used in religious ceremonies, symbolizing life, sustenance, and community. Monks grew rye in monastery gardens, baked it in communal ovens, and consumed it as part of their daily ritual. To them, rye was more than food. It was a tangible blessing, a symbol of divine providence that sustained both body and spirit in difficult times. Rye also found its way into the rich tapestry of Scandinavian folklore. Superstitions abounded about the protective powers of rye bread. Some believed placing a loaf on a windowsill could ward off famine or evil spirits. Others thought eating rye bread before sleep would bring vivid dreams and good fortune. Harvest festivals often included rituals giving thanks to the land, not for abundance, but for the modest gift of rye that ensured survival. This humility, this acceptance of enough, was central to the relationship between rye and the people of medieval Scandinavia. The grain was never extravagant or flashy. It was steady, reliable, and persistent, qualities that mirrored the spirit of those who depended on it. In a land where too much hope could lead to ruin, such steadfastness was invaluable. Even in death, rye played a role in rituals. Some communities placed rye bread in coffins or shared it with mourners at funerals. It was a final act of generosity, a symbol of the cycle of life and sustenance that connected generations. Rye bound the living and the dead, weaving a story of survival through shared bread. As the centuries passed, agriculture evolved and other grains like wheat and barley made a comeback, particularly among the wealthy. But rye never lost its place in the north. It remained the grain of the common people, the dependable staple that shaped diets and cultures. Its presence in Scandinavian kitchens and markets has endured into the modern era, where it continues to be celebrated for its hearty flavor and nutritional benefits. Today, rye enjoys renewed popularity, prized by nutritionists for its fiber content, slow energy release, and unique taste. Artisanal bakers craft sourdough loaves studded with seeds, reviving ancient recipes with modern techniques. Rye is no longer just a food for survival. It is a choice for the mindful eater, a connection to history and heritage. But its significance has never been about trend or fashion. The story of rye is a story of survival, resilience, and the intimate relationship between people and the land they inhabit. It is about persistence in the face of hardship and finding sustenance where others saw only scarcity. Rye was essential to medieval Scandinavia because it required little but gave much. It grew where nothing else would. It fed families when times were tough. It was steady through storms and seasons of uncertainty. Rye stood quietly through the long, dark winters, and in doing so, it stood alongside the people who planted it. This enduring grain helped shape a legacy, not one of power or conquest, but one of endurance and connection. A legacy that still lives on, carried in every dense, dark slice of rye bread passed down from hand to hand, generation to generation, reminding us of a time when survival depended not on glory, but on the simple, steadfast gifts of the earth.